Welcome back to Watercolor Theory. Today I will be demoing these bee eaters, killer bees, or I'm calling the painting bandits of the sky. This is a sculpting tool that I use to mix my paints. That way I don't have to rinse all the paint out of the brush. Here is the photo reference from Unsplash, David Claude. And you can see I've got my chip brushes lined up. Here's the colored pencil drawing. I transferred it over. I'll show the transfer here momentarily. Used colored pencils, obviously. When I transferred it, I used a 2H pencil and then filled in the gaps. Here I'm applying my colors. I have a kind of a homemade indigo made out of phthalo turquoise and quinacridone red shade. My color palette is phthalo turquoise, phthalo blue red shade, quinacridone, red light, transparent pyrrole orange, green gold, sap green, and quinacridone gold. I just lifted the painting up with a block just to give it a little bit of a slant. I don't want it to be at like a 15 or a 20 degree angle though. Then gravity will take over and be too aggressive. Here's the initial wash on a color study. Since there are a lot of complementary colors going on, I wanted to make sure I had the right mix. Here's the reference photo again. Lots of golds, teals, blues, oranges, and some of them right up next to each other. So I wanted to make sure I had a good color range. I wanted to take this opportunity to discuss why I do my backgrounds the way I do. The first photo shows a background in focus, which many people take as tourist photos, and the bee eaters still stand out. However, they kind of blend a little bit. Thanks to their brightness, they do stand out. But in this next slide, you see the background is blurred. And I liken this to an oil painter or an acrylic painter blocking in the background in approximate colors. So think of my backgrounds as being approximate colors and an abstraction of what is there. So imagine in the final here's
picture,
the second wash of the color study.
There's acacia trees.
There's
There's
showing the interplay
plains,
of colors,
or
and
in this case, the
the finished
with acacia
painting
trees and
is
Mount Kilimanjaro in the background.
more subtle in
this
some
is
areas.
why I
where
do
the birds
this. I
kind of
let the
disappear.
imagination
The
take over.
lower left bird's
rather than me
chest
obsessing
stands out
over
in the
a
final
background,
one, and the
which really
upper right bird's head
isn't
stands
that
out.
important
So they vary
for this
a little bit.
painting.
Now I'm adding a little bit of orange a little bit of water to the orange. And I'm using a fan brush. The fan brush doesn't put down quite as heavily. Now I've switched back over to a chip brush and clearly have sped this up quite a bit. Throughout the process, I'll skip the blotting. This initial wash took about 45 minutes to do from start to finish. And then the drawing was probably about 45 minutes as well. So an hour and a half invested initially. I think it's about 4 hours invested in the painting process. The watercolor block is starting to get wet now, and things are starting to come into play. A couple areas that I wanted to push in the color. Here's the cutout I used to transfer the design onto the watercolor block, since you can't use a tracing table. And then here it is blown up. So I just draw in those little pockets and just the contours. You can see little tick marks. I put those on there so I know where I've drawn. And I also mounted on a hinge to the paper so that as I'm going through the process, I can just lift it and see how things are coming together and use it as a guide. And I can also use it as a guide later in case an area is just covered in color and I can't figure out where the detailed items are. But as you can see, these tails, I had put them in, and I don't really care about the detail very much because I do like some areas to pop out and others to recede. So now I'm negative painting around the head of the bird on the top right so that that area will stand out. Whereas the tails on the bottom, you can see, are kind of blending in with either the the Serengeti or the Savannah, prairie, whatever. Um, I'm still working on that sky area using gravity in the opposite direction. Have the board slightly tilted, and I'll continue to move that throughout the process. Adding a little spritz to get things moving. Another spritz. So this is just an example of what it looked like when it was dried before moving on to stage 2, but I am still painting stage 1. Now here's an enlargement showing the colored pencil drawing still intact. So some of those colors, especially the darker ones, obviously show through. The lighter ones disappear. Now I'm trying to blend this a little bit so that the birds' bodies and tails blend in with the background as if they're slightly camouflaged up against the trees of the Serengeti. Want that to really move around. I love all the little organic shapes here and there. Initially, I didn't like that I had brought the branch down to the bottom, but in the end, it turned out pretty good. While I have you here, have you subscribed yet? Just to remind you, it is free. There's no charge to subscribe to my channel. There's no credit card needed or anything. So just hit subscribe. Helps the channel out. Helps me help you. Have a great day. Using transparent colors right now, and they seem to have the biggest color shift between start to finish. They might look very dark when there's water, in it, but as it dries, the paint just doesn't show through quite as much. Now I've moved on to phase 2. The background is fully dried. When I'm painting these items, I'm obviously up very close to the painting, and I see the detail, and I see in my mind's eye what I want. So I always have to remember to go just slightly either darker, brighter, more color contrast using warm and cool, whatever it may be, because I know what I'm looking at, but without any context, that background is just an abstract painting. Now with the birds, it's an abstract background that you can give some context to and maybe make out a sky, and maybe you picture an acacia tree, or you picture watching a documentary about Africa, and so you kind of can see stuff in the background. You're out in the heat, and the heat waves are playing tricks on your eyes or whatever, and that's kind of what I'm going for. I really want to engage the imagination and not fully illustrate everything. Speaking of which, I felt like I was getting a little too detailed in here, but once I put in the tail and all the connecting parts, it all worked out pretty well. Going back and forth between cobalt teal and manganese blue. Using that cobalt teal to surround the masks of both birds. It's really interesting how the colors just sit right next to each other. A complementary color of gold next to a golden orange next to a bluish teal. It's just kind of an artist's dream, I would say. Painting with a transparent medium, if they mix, it can be a little dreadful. Or if they mix wet into wet, sometimes it's not bad. But going over it dry, they'll kind of could make a bit of a muddy color. Try to move back and forth so I don't get too bogged down in one area. Allowing an area to sit for a little while gives you a chance to get used to it. Unless your mission is to copy something exact, then take whatever time. I've seen some people that move around when they are copying exact, and they move the color from one area to another. And I've seen other artists who complete a section and then they move on to the next section. So using a mixture of Viridian green, uh, cobalt blue, cobalt blue deep, just kind of going all over, just to have a lot of variety in there. There are different points where I felt I could have left the branch pretty plain, but kept adding to it and felt that I was kind of going back to an old way of painting where I was putting in a lot of detail or not doing big washes. So this is something I have to work on in my journey, is um, keeping loose, using very wet washes, um, even on smaller areas. There's a lot of variety in the background. I didn't really need to use granulating colors, um, but I do like the cadmiums for they're just so vibrant, and the cobalt and manganese. And I don't use these colors very often, and I gotta say Viridian as well. So it was fun doing this. On the paint palette, there's two tubes of paint that I didn't use at all. Potter's Pink, named after Beatrix Potter, and then Cobalt Violet. And I don't put them on the palette because they dry hard as a rock and they're really hard to reactivate. And that's also a reason I don't use, or I don't keep cobalts around either. They just dry up so much, they're hard to reactivate. So I always like to use uh, I like to use fresh paint all the time as well. So I don't mind squeezing the tubes and conserving the paint, because I've had situations. I think cerulean is probably the worst, where it just is almost impossible to re-wet. So I don't really even use cerulean anymore. I just mix a little bit of cobalt uh, blue and manganese blue, or whatever. But I'm not a painter that's as particular about uh, color specificity as some others are. So now I'm warming up that branch a little bit, and I will do a lot of lifting here, where I just put down the whole paper towel and lift, and then put it down again and lift, and let the colors work together with a little bit of moisture. And I'm using complements, um, some oranges, and then some blue violets to really make a nice warm brown. I don't have an actual brown on the palette. I own a few browns, but I'm not big on using them. I'd prefer the mixture to give a little life to the painting. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks again. Some of these other brushes I'm using are I have a Winsor & Newton Squirrel Quill brush, and then right now I'm using a silver black velvet. Looks like it's probably a number 4. And there I am lifting again. It's either a 4 or a 6. I've also purchased some squirrel brushes off of Amazon, a couple different 3-packs, and I really enjoy them. Like here, you can see I'm putting down a lot of water to soften up that branch, and then I'm going to pump in some green here, charge it in there to just really get that to blend, so that it kind of blends in with the tree line or whatever it is that we want to call that background. The subtlety in some areas, so hard and soft edges, um, help draw the eye. Speaking of drawing the eye, here I am painting the red in the eye. So I'll use a cadmium red, quinacridone red light mixture. I'll let it sit for a moment, and then I'll put in some transparent pyrrole orange, and then let that sit for a moment, and then I'll lift it. I'm not sure if it made the edit, but I lifted it out with a Q-tip. Final touches that are not on the on film would be adding a little bit more black to the masks, and the pupils of the eye, and then putting in the signature, and then that's it. While I have you here, have you subscribed yet? Just to remind you, it is free. There's no charge to subscribe to my channel. There's no credit card needed or anything. So just hit subscribe. Helps the channel out. Helps me help you. Have a great day.